Okay. Welcome to our subject, Survey of the Afro-Asian Literature. I will be your discussant for today, and here are my group members. Starting off with our investigative researchers and developers, Mr. Dave Peralta and Ms. Mary Chris Mosca. Followed by our gravity-defying assessor, Ms. Joanne Del Rosario. Next is our hawk-eyed monitor, Ms. Ronaldine Manguera. Of course, last but not the least, our active participants, Mr. Giancarlo Sarabia and Ms. Ana Cristina Bragais. Today, we will be discussing about the characteristics of African literature, the 5 poets and writers of African literature. But before that, let us take a short review of what is literature. Literature is derived from the Latin word litera, which means the letter of the alphabet or handwriting. The first evidence of writing is from Sumerian civilization, in which we see hieroglyphs and paintings as the first records of events in the past. This term refers to all oral, written accounts such as poetry, fiction, non-fiction, tales, journalisms, and even songs that is made through our new form of literature, the digital. A literature reflects the events of the past such as early governance, revolutions, culture, beliefs, and other significant events that has still impact up to date. In relation to that, we will be focusing on the African literature, which is defined by the InfoPlease Encyclopedia as literary works of the African continent, which originated specifically from South Africa, East Africa, and suburb Rhodesian. This is not just merely a work of African people, but there are also works written in English, Portuguese, and French in traditional oral and written works. Now, we have 4 types of African literature. First, the oral literature. It is a literature delivered by speech or mouth. Next, the pre-colonial literature. This is written before the coming of white men. Followed by the colonial literature. This is written during the colonization in Africa. And last but not the least is the post-colonial literature. Of course, this is written after the colonization period in Africa. Just a quick trivia. Dating back 1,000 years ago, African literature has originated from ancient Egypt's hieroglyphs or the writings which uses pictures and symbols to represent words. That's right! Moreover, African literature exists to remind the whole community about their ancestors' heroic deeds, cultures, beliefs, and ideas. I hope that is all clear to you. Now, let us move forward to the characteristics of African literature. Historically, Africans have been slaves before they achieved freedom from the colonizers. So, most of their literatures talks about empowerment, freedom, and a revolution. Or, in today's context, it is the word woke. So here are the characteristics of African literature. First, African literature talks about slave narratives. Since African people are often slaves of other countries, they write about their lives in South Africa and also about escaping to achieve freedom. These are written by the fugitive slaves. Number 2, African literature protests about colonization. The source of evil, violence, and discrimination are often subject of African writers as a protest against colonial rule. This is done in order to encourage everyone to have sense of African. These writers are using literature to speak against enslavement, stereotype, racial inequality, because Africans are labeled as primitive, savage, and lacking distinctive culture. Third, the African literature is a call for independence. This leads in reaching the masses at home and abroad, thanks to the nationalist leaders who have charismatic abilities and personalities, and who have also framed ideas of equality, independence, and nationalism. What do you think about this? Is there any similarity from this country and the African literature was made and characterized? I know what you're thinking. Do you see the similarity of how the literature of our country, the Philippines, and the African was made? We were both colonized before, and that gave birth to the literature which promotes freedom, revolution, criticism, and equality. That's right. Now, let us proceed to the latter characteristics of African literature. Number 4, African literature promotes pride. Recreation of African identities promotes the ideas of cultural movement of African literacy. Number 5, African literature promotes hope for the future. Beyond the purpose of literature that is against the colonizers, this was still made to focus on literature of hope over the betrayal of liberation struggles in Africa. Number 6, African literature is a dissent. To send message about political issues, writers expresses through poems, stories, and other forms of literature which has characters. Maybe we could conclude that literature are made in order to express and with people who are concerned with people and their country. I think this is such a foundation why a literature should exist. We will be moving forward to the 5 writers and poets of African literature. First, Chinua Achebe. He is the largest Nigerian prose writer of the country's colonial past and its present as an African state. The process of breaking the traditional way of African community and the attempt of British administration to unite the original people to the benefit of civilization is shown in a bright and fascinating form. National problems can be solved by means inherited from the colonizers. This is the main idea of the writer who received the International Booker Prize of 2007 for the novel Things Fall Apart. Next, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Ngugi wa Thiong'o is a famous Kenyan writer and playwright. He writes in English and Kikuyu. In 2010 and 2014, he was considered as one of the best candidates for the Nobel Prize. It seems that this should already inspire for reading, doesn't it? In the novels With Grain and Devil on the Cross, he describes the struggles of Kenyans for independence and about modern Kenya, which hasn't overcome class contradictions yet. This book already translated into 50 languages. Next is Amos Tutuola. This prose writer, Amos Tutuola, is distinguished by the intertwining of myth and reality, both wonderful and ordinary. His books, The Palm Wine Drink Card and My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, are modern transposition of the folk motifs in Africa, abundantly flavored on the reflection of death. It is not surprising that the writer gained world fame on his debut. The next writer is J.M. Coetzee. He is a South African writer. He wrote an extraordinary novel that describes a small border town of an unnamed empire, in which, from this empire, the temporary ruler falls in love with a convict. This happening is against the opposition between empire and the barbarians. As a rule, the author does not indicate which country does it happen, but it is obvious that we are talking about the South Africa. Coetzee is the winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2003. Next, Meja Wangi. Meja Wangi is also a Kenyan writer who is concerned about social issues that the modern Kenya is facing. It is about the illiteracy, unemployment, poverty, and the AIDS epidemic. This novel uncast 2 boys living in poverty and earning money through honest labor who works both in mine and the farm. As a result, these 2 boys ends up in prison. For this novel, Wangi received the Literary Prize of Jomo Kenyatta in 1974, thus becoming the first winner of this award. That will be all, and I thank you.
Now the discussion proper is done. Here are the 2 thought-provoking questions to be answered by the participant. Number 1. What if you were one of the poet or writer in African literature? What kind of characteristics are you going to choose considering today's world event? Number 2, in the modern world, what do you think is the new media effect on African literature and what could be the possible effect for the future reference?